Everyone, thank you for joining the session. We will go ahead and get started today with our 2023 predictions. This webinar is presented in partnership with Quandary and Pipefy. So just a few housekeeping items as we get started today. This session is a 1-hour session. 45 minutes of that will be dedicated for a presentation by both of our presenters here. And we'll leave about 15 minutes for questions and answers. So if you do have some questions along the way, feel free to drop them into the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. Everybody on the line is muted in case you haven't noticed. So if you have any of those questions or insights to add to the session, definitely drop them into the chat or the Q&A boxes, and we'll get all of your inquiries addressed. We will be sending out the slides and recording for the session. We get asked this all the time. Yes, we will be sharing all the materials you'll see today, so don't feel like you have to take notes or anything. You will get those in your inbox. Check your junk or your spam folders within, give us about a day and we'll have those to you. And if you don't see them, you can feel free to reach out, but all of the materials that you'll see today will be shared with you. So you can pass them along, watch it again, whatever you feel the need to do. And another quick note, watch out for poll questions. We do have some poll questions throughout the session today. We encourage audience participation and interaction, so make sure you keep an eye out for those. Sometimes they pop up on a separate screen if you're using dual screens, so keep an eye out for the poll questions, and we'd love to get your guys' insight as we go through here. All right, as we get started today, I would love to introduce our presenters. Dennis Levy is the Director of Services at Quandary Consulting Group, a Pipefy partner. For over 25 years, Dennis has been a leader of technology services organizations in companies both large and small, ranging from pure technology consulting firms to big data organizations, SaaS startups, and anything in between. So he is a wealth of experience as he joins us today. He's originally from Winnipeg, Canada, and he's currently residing in Phoenix, Arizona. So thank you, Dennis, for joining us. Very lucky to have him on the line. Also with us today is Mark Pinard, the CMO at Pipefy and a serial product marketing leader. He has a product marketing background and an uncanny understanding of markets, knowing what trends are taking shape, what implications those have for solution providers, and how to solve those with very innovative solutions. He brings over a decade of experience in successfully bringing products to market with innovative ways to solve age-old problems at companies such as Intuit, Xero, and Lob. Thank you, Mark, for joining us, and Dennis. All right, a couple topics just to kick off today. First, we'll be talking about market trends and some of the key drivers for 2023 that we're seeing within the market and in the field, and what that means for people as we go through some of our business challenges. We'll then cover, of course, the 5 low-code predictions for the new year. So top things that we think are going to happen, better or worse, right or wrong. That's what we think is going to happen and what those implications are going to be on businesses. And then we'll take a look at some next steps and what the look ahead for future. And then we'll have a quick introduction to Pipefy and Quandary. Nothing too big there. And then we'll go ahead and get started into our questions and answer session. So with that, we'll introduce what is driving the changes in 2023.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction, Lindsay. Really appreciate it. And Dennis, looking forward to a great session with you. So to dive in, what is driving changes in 2023? We'll go through some of the key market drivers, and among many others, they're kind of 3 primary market drivers that are impacting business and the economy as we see as a whole today. First, which everyone I'm sure is very much aware of, is inflation and the economic downturn and how that's affecting businesses, especially with the uncertain times. Second is the increasing customer expectations and what that means for us to stay competitive in a world where honestly, the next newest customer is probably at a scarcity. And then lastly, accelerate digital transformation and how honestly that's more important than ever. I'll go through each one of these guys individually and then discuss the associated impact of each. So first, inflation and economic downturn. The reality is that the economy is changing, and everything from buying a carton of eggs to running a business. And it's now more important than ever for companies to be agile and flexible to survive that. And then secondly, the increasing customer expectations. In a recession, new customers are more scarce, harder to come by, and so delivering a better customer experience is critical to kind of winning that customer away from your competition and working with you. And then lastly, on that accelerated digital transformation, COVID is forcing companies to make a digital strategy as their top priority. And then obviously due to the remote workforces, then the need for technology to adapt that into the actual change in that world. Post-COVID and now uncertain times, operational efficiency driven by digital advantages is still at the top of that priority list, and probably more important than ever. Companies need to adapt. They need to adapt their processes, and then they need to drive internal efficiency in order to ensure that they're meeting their budget needs and able to do with everything that they can with the resources that they have. So to review some of the business impacts of those, on the first one is shrinking budgets and strained resources. So pretty much, I think anyone with a LinkedIn account or a TV understands and is aware of like the mass layoffs and the doom and gloom of what is being presented of tech today. And because of that, companies are taking drastic measures to then prepare for kind of like the uncertainty that lies ahead in the upcoming months. Growth at all costs is now taking a back seat to profitability, and which investors and shareholders are much more interested in these days. And with budgets being slashed, deeper conversations are being had between CTOs and then CFOs looking to do more with less, and then are really kind of taking inventory of the internal resources that they have to be able to support new and upcoming initiatives in the upcoming year. On the second one, the pressure to stay competitive. So this is a big one. Less budget obviously means more competition and a greater need for differentiation in order for companies to survive in these uncertain times. And then customers on the other end are demanding more immersive customer experiences, whether it be in person or online. They are looking for businesses to provide them more with less dollars spent. And then delivering that experience needs to be a competitive advantage, as buyers these days will be much more harder to come by. And then no matter how you engage with consumers, whether it be online, offline, or a mix of both, people need to ask themselves of like, how can we add even more value for our customers by turning this interaction into a better experience? And that is actually going to turn into the longevity of the customer over time. Lastly, innovation at all costs in order to stay ahead of the competition. So with this one, net, companies are looking to stretch a dollar further, and a digital transformation strategy allows them to save millions in operating and product costs by making their departments much more efficient in the way that they work together internally and externally. And we'll go through a few of those in the slides ahead.
So I think, Mark, the theme of 2020, as I see it, of the 2020s rather, the last 3 years, is only the strong will survive. Strength through innovation, and watch your back, because there's a lot of very hungry new organizations that want to thrive and take your business. Whether you look in streaming media, fast food restaurants, e-commerce, every one of those, the incumbents feel like they're playing a risky game right now, and the competition is fierce.
For sure. And I think it's a matter of businesses looking at their balance sheet and really understanding of like what every dollar they spend and what that adds up to, and picking your innovations accordingly, right? To make the most out of the resources that they do have.
Yep.
So where are we seeing the biggest impact? No surprises here, right? Any back office operations are probably getting hit the hardest by these drivers, because historically they've had the most manual processes and the least amount of digitally innovative solutions. So a lot is still being done by spreadsheets and emails and Slack threads and other, carrier pigeons, other ways to be able to communicate and work together. Gartner believes by 2025, organizations running inflexible and poorly performing critical customer-facing processes will suffer the most, more than a 10% loss in market share due to just delivering bad customer experiences. And because of that, from a department level, we're seeing a digital change across all the departments, but some of the biggest ones that we see are impacted are HR operations, finance and revenue operations. Those are a couple that are at the top of the list right now. And then HR operations departments are the ones that obviously remote and hybrid work has pushed to adapt the fastest. So if we take a step back and think about all the things that have had to change or adapt to over the years, especially with COVID and now moving into the to this new environment, think about the influx of benefits and sick time requests, and then increase due to kind of COVID-related illnesses. A rapid change of employees moving around the country or even the world due to the opportunity to be remote, and then the payroll requests and then changes required in order to support those moves. An influx of manager offboarding requests as a result of like the quote unquote great resignation, and then employees deciding to take their skills elsewhere. And then on top of that, there's obviously the influx of new job posting, recruiting, employee onboarding, and then requests due to replace those employees that have decided to leave. And then the list goes on and on. But the end result is employers are scrambling to do literally everything they can to keep employees happy and engaged. On the finance side, their role has changed quite a bit as well. So an influx of spending requests as we start to adapt to these new digital tools and to support remote employees, like new equipment, new tools, new home office support, has also changed the role of IT and how they're distributing all of these tools to the employees to get them up and running as fast as possible, and to be able to support like the remote meetings and everything that's happening from a hybrid company. Piperify itself just went through a sales kickoff, and we have a distributed workforce across the entire world. So to get everybody in a single roof and the amount of technology it takes to do that is a big thing for finance and figuring out how to handle those costs in the vendor selection process. There's much heavier requirements on a backlog of invoice and bill processing as a result of that, and then budgeting and spending management in relation to hiring and the leaving in new employees is all pushing finance to the brink of what they can do. And then lastly, like revenue operations, it's literally the same story, right? All sales associates now remote. Management of their activities, ensuring new customers are given the white glove treatment is of the utmost importance. And then supporting these new customers by tracking and managing their onboarding and ongoing customer support requests is a huge issue. And then lastly, the education and training around that is always the most important, but it's a challenging with a team that does not have the proper tools to do so. So you can see this push out of what we've done, the status quo in the past, and this movement to this digitization and really focusing in on the processes and workflows and getting those fine tunes. Anything outside of that, and the COVID has really pushed us to do this, leads to drop balls, missed deadlines, broken communication structures, worsely unhappy customers, or even worse than that, missed revenue targets. So what does this mean? Teams are now forced to do more with less, like we had mentioned earlier. And because of that, businesses are looking for proper tooling and solutions to make them much more integrated and, to be honest, operationally efficient, right? So now's the time, if anything, when, as you mentioned, the balance sheet, people are looking for ways to save money. And internally, they're finding a lot of those ways to save money and add to the bottom line is by creating more efficiency and just like the way that they operate. Back office operations are now playing a little bit of a role of survival of the fittest, and they are looking for ways themselves, right, outside of IT support to kind of like find more efficiency and not be a victim of the backlog of IT, right? So they're looking for better ways to work with IT, but more ways to be able to implement and find solutions that work for their department units. And then lastly, operational efficiencies. Obviously, the top priority is organizations are thinking outside of the box for those new ways to do more things with fewer resources. And we'll dive into that as we kind of go through some of the predictions and look at the results of that.
Mark, I would also add one aspect to this that's a little bit not obvious, is that this will allow smaller organizations that are much more innovative and nimble to actually grow a back office and become operationally effective from day one. So we're seeing technology applied in terms of automation and low code, no code, that there's very sophisticated operations within very small organizations, much more than would have been capable a number of years ago. So not only, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and that brings up a great point, right? It's like enabling those business departments to utilize and set up operations in a way that they feel more efficient, right? And to your point, I think comes with that, like IT kind of helps build the framework and some of the governance to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So there's 6 layers of that we see to this operational efficiency. And Dennis, feel free to jump in at any point to add to some of these. The prioritization of efficiency requires, organizations to focus on being operational efficiency, and the 6 key pillars to it. First of all, starts with digitization, right? Like, simply put, digitization creates better processes that are going to eliminate that manual work and kind of remove that dreaded spider web of spreadsheets, email, and Slack messages, and things that are tracked offline, and then multiple spreadsheets that need to be updated, or right. And then it makes consolidating and centralizing data easier. So speeding up the workflows, and then removing the data silos of things sitting outside of your core systems. And then lastly, it allows you to kind of centralize that data, and then speeds up the workflows. And then once again, making sure that all of that data is connected and sitting in one place. The second pillar to this is automation. So David just kind of alluded to it, but eliminating the manual repetitive tasks that kind of burn through your resources and are making them work long hours. And some of those manual tasks obviously introduce errors and then create a ton of unnecessary work. So like, automation kind of takes that out of the equation, which is key. And then lastly, like, automating workflows such as things as request management and then approvals or notifications, it creates greater operational efficiency, then at the end of the day adds dollars to your bottom line. The third one would be collaboration. So many of the workflows and processes have cross-team and then departmental needs that they have to collaborate around this, and then will require input or action from external stakeholders at sometimes. Forms and portals make it easier to capture information input from anyone, anywhere, and at any time. But by using a tool to connect your apps and systems to your existing tech stack, you can kind of simplify that communication flow and then collaborate much easier underneath a single roof, which I think is hugely important. Integration. So this one basically allows you to get more out of your existing tech stack. So it creates kind of a unified ecosystem and allows that information to flow back and forth between your primary department tools. What we've seen is that a lot of the departments have kind of a centralized system that they use, whether it be customer operations like a Salesforce, or in HR, kind of like a Workday or something like that. Those systems can now be integrated with other external departments like your IT team, or anything that require multiple inputs to onboard that new employee. And obviously having integrations are hugely important to connect, anything from your ERP, your apps, your databases, and then also any of your legacy components. That integration portion of it is incredibly important. Orchestration, centralize, again, like we've kind of mentioned in the other ones, but it's all about centralizing all your information activities by orchestrating them, ensuring that there's kind of like a frictionless process there to support. Every team kind of relies on a complex array of workflows and processes, and by coordinating these, teams now move from a fragmented to more of that frictionless work together, and everything is kind of seamless. And it feels like that process is a lot easier, and does. And honestly, the efficiency that it provides is incredibly important. Again, back to that bottom line of adding thousands, if not millions of dollars sometimes to those workflows. And then continuous improvement is kind of a no-brainer. Everyone is looking to do this. You want to empower your team to evolve, adapt, and then always improve as they go. And the low-code framework kind of gives businesses the tools that they need to build, as well as modify those processes and workflows quickly, depending on the changes that are obviously happening in the world, or customer feedback, or internally if you identify a process that needs more efficiency and can improve.
All right, so as promised, we'll get started with one of our poll questions. So question number 1, hopefully everybody can see this and submit your responses. What is the biggest market driver impacting your organization? So we talked through 3 big market drivers. The first, economic downturn, that includes supply chain challenges, inflation, and all that fun stuff. The second being rising customer expectations and the pressure that brings on competition among the market. And the third is accelerated just digital transformation, whether that's driven by post-pandemic world transition with that, or just overall digitization among your business. So we'll make sure everybody gets a chance to answer that one. Again, sometimes the polls show up on a separate screen if you have 2 monitors. So keep an eye out for that pop up. All right, looks like everyone's had a chance to submit. So we'll share these results so you guys can see what we're looking at. Looks like the economic downturn and some of those issues associated with it is the biggest concern for those of you on the line. All right. I'll hand it over to Dennis to take us through what this means.
Thank you, Lindsay. So we talked about some kind of depressing things this morning. Economic downturn, primarily on the top of the list there. So how are we actually seeing the market and how are we addressing this? So we are seeing very clearly the rise of citizen development. So citizen development, stated really simply, is where really the technology change is pushed down into the lines of business, where non-IT experts using appropriate technology with the support of IT are able to build very effective software using low-code and no-code platforms, such as Pipefy. This graphic is from the Project Management Institute and very clearly cites a lot of interesting statistics around citizen development. So we see the first number there, very interesting, 500,000 software developers, a deficit in the United States by next year. I would contend that that perhaps is even higher than 500,000 software developers that are essentially unfilled positions. 67% of employers said they couldn't find qualified candidates. Gartner says 4 times more citizen developers than professional developers by 2023. That's this year. And almost 500,000 apps will be built in the next 5 years using low-code tools. Additionally, Forrester shows that 2/3 of firms are currently planning or will plan in the next 12 months a strategy around citizen development. So we're seeing this very definitely as this sort of driven by the market, driven by the downturns, driven by innovation and the need to compete using innovation, very much seeing citizen development as something we're observing within our customer base at Quandary, as well as certainly the Project Management Institute and some very, very significant names have recognized this as a movement. There are some requirements, however, to an organization adapting and adopting citizen development. One firm cites some effective, to be effective at citizen development, there needs to be within a team complete know-how of business operations in order for business users to actually build effective software using low-code and no-code technology. They obviously need to be have really good digital skills, be very highly motivated to learn new technologies and optimize things, and the ability to collaborate with other departments within their organization. Personally, I'm seeing one of the bigger challenges that we're facing is around identifying people that do in fact have complete know-how of their own business operations. Many of our customers are also suffering some of the same things we talked about earlier in this webinar. They're short-staffed, they're being worked very hard, and sometimes that insight around business operations simply doesn't exist. And in those cases, we can help with customers, help those customers do the appropriate analysis and really figure out kind of where optimizations can be identified and then worked through with technology. Certainly, citizen development is something that Quandary is leaning heavily into this year, and the notion of citizen development governance, which is pretty significant for us. Next slide. So some of the organizational impacts, adopting a citizen development strategy is not simply something you do and there is no impact within an organization. So imagine you run an IT organization and suddenly your business users are building software and they're integrating with stuff and they are starting to do things. On one hand, that's really great because it helps you reduce your IT backlog. On another hand, there needs to be a level of governance because there's a lot of things to consider within especially larger organizations. Some of the things of the challenges we're seeing, and there are many, the historical software development model is not something that is commonly known around business teams. And it's not necessarily applicable for building software using low-code, no-code technologies and having a lot of automation and connectivity to backing applications. The Project Management Institute has identified something and defined something called the hyper-agile software development lifecycle. We're moving within Quandary towards a much more agile approach to building or helping customers build within the framework of citizen development. Regardless, it has to accommodate for quick innovation. It has to accommodate for change. And there's you can't build something that's too brittle. Low code and no code technology like Pipefy really fits nicely into Scrum because it's technology that lets very powerful features be built very quickly. We can do demos within the course of a sprint, and we can adjust what's been built within the course of a sprint. And it's really kind of an ideal tech to be used within Agile. And this was something that didn't necessarily exist in the same way or with the same type of combination just a few years ago. The notion of business process automation really is about automating flow and consistency of information across different systems. It requires to build something like this requires a very deep understanding of business operations. That is something that citizen development, as I mentioned on the previous slide, mandates for success. However, isn't necessarily something that we're running into in a consistent way within our customer base. To be honest, the technology of business process automation isn't new. 20 years ago, I worked for a company, and this was all about service-oriented architecture and having the notion of different systems communicating via a message broker. However, what has happened is that the technology has advanced greatly, the usability has advanced greatly, and just the sheer number of ways in which newer technology like Pipefy can connect is much more improved than 20 years ago, certainly. One thing this introduces, and we'll talk a little bit more about citizen development governance, is if I have automation and connectivity across backing servers and I run an IT organization, I'm concerned about all sorts of things. One of them might be my single source of truth within my organization. My widget is defined in one system, but now I have that system connecting to lots of other things. I start to have secondary sources of truth, and that's not generally looked on in a very positive way within large enterprises. So there's a notion of citizen development governance that kind of rides on top of all of this. And then we did talk about citizen development. Is it a magic bullet, or does it really accelerate risk within the organization? There are lots of things, lots of concerns around citizen development that there simply needs to be some acceptance of and ways to mitigate. Things like a very high risk of a shadow IT organization being built when you have this sort of core of citizen developers within an organization. You can get into compliance and security trouble. You can start to build bigger silos of information that are interconnected. And the silos now are not really silos. They're kind of cities of silos. And then much more simple and basic, you can start to have unsupported technology introduce itself into organizations. And that is not something that IT organizations are really happy about. So it's really important for citizen development governance to actually involve IT as a partner. So that citizen development is not seen as something that's a threat and something that is just a little bit of a rogue actor. There's an interesting case study. It's cited in a number of places around Shell Oil. They needed to make citizen development work at scale. Shell Oil is a very big organization, obviously, and there's a number of ways in which they made it work. For example, they had approval from the Shell CIO. They had a VP assigned to lead the initiative, and they subdivided different projects into types of citizen development, ranging from full-on citizen developers within business units, all the way through the same technologies being used by their IT group with citizen development as a, or citizen developers rather, as a stakeholder. So it's a pretty interesting case study, and a lot of good success came out of that. We're seeing citizen development in a lot of smaller, in larger organizations, certainly, but in smaller organizations as well, where it's really grown from a grassroots level. It's not really called citizen development, but it is what it, that is actually what it is, and it's actually what we're seeing. And it's fascinating to see it evolve. I think we have another poll.
Yes, another poll question. All right. Second question for everybody. Do you see low code and BPA as a strategy to reduce IT development backlog? So yes, it is the only way forward, or low code is shadow IT with a new name, or maybe it's too early to know, or the last option, training, governance, and best practices are being developed. So everyone can just go ahead and give second to answer the poll question. Dennis gave a pretty good overview of low code and BPA. All right, looks like the numbers have settled here. And we'll take a look and see what the results show. It looks like a majority says, yes, it is the only way forward. Excellent.
There is no hesitation there. I love it.
No hesitation there, by and large. And now we'll go into our top 5 predictions for the new year.
So I will jump in on the first couple of these. So the first one, inflation and supply chain disruption will cast a long shadow. I'm trying to stay positive and away from the doom and gloom that Dennis had mentioned and the depressing of it. But remember that carton of eggs that I mentioned in the first slide. So there's no doubt we're kind of living in some different times right now, right? And every aspect of our life is being impacted in one way or another, right? And then inflation and supply chain disruptions are obviously casting that long shadow across everything we do now more than ever. And it's important for organizations to be able to kind of control what they control, and that really is around that operational efficiency. It's getting your prized resources to work better together, and for those things that were maybe done in more manual ways in the past to be able to really take the time to improve them. And I think that anything from an economy perspective, it gives us that opportunity to kind of look internally to see where we can make those improvements. And we know that when the economy slows down, it's going to impact our ability to acquire those new customers. But again, we still got to figure out a way to be able to grow the business. And by looking internally and creating that efficiencies, there are probably millions of dollars to be had just by ensuring we're kind of running as lean as possible, and by investing into the technology to be able to support that. And Dennis, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think return on investment is still a thing, first of all. So a strong ROI model is still very important. We're seeing cases where we're saving thousands of hours by automating thousands of hours per activity by automating certain business processes that are extremely time consuming. And I mean, that's a significant return on investment, super significant. And still definitely a thing I would argue even more important than ever. I think in terms of the long shadow that, I mentioned earlier, streaming media, things like that. We've seen some transformations within that industry, like Netflix, for example. Only the strong survive. Netflix is trying to pivot to an ad model. Lots of people are leaving Netflix, leaving them, including the Levy household who left them. But we're seeing a lot of upstarts. I think shifting consumer behavior is not ended. And I think that competition is still very much out there, is still very hungry. And if I were to make a prediction, I would say the next giant we're going to see impacted in a very bad way is Amazon.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a buzz around the dilution of their reputation in terms of allowing in some sketchy resellers, some sketchy vendors in there. I try and order a USB hub, and I have the same hub being sold by 75 different merchants from all over the place, and I have no idea the quality I'm going to get. I think they've diluted their own brand value. So that's my bold prediction on inflation, supply chain disruptions, and the side effects of what we're seeing. And that will indeed be a very long shadow if Amazon is hit.
Yep. So inevitably, prevention will take center stage. I don't think, burnout during COVID was probably at its highest peak, right? With everyone working remote, there's never really a cutoff between, working at home and then, shutting off and actually moving into family time or into home time outside of the office. And obviously this is now even more extreme with, in the back of everyone's heads, the thought of budget cuts and resource cuts. And, this is going to lead to longer working hours and, as we look to turn every penny into a dollar and inevitably, to higher burnout rates. The solution to this is really high prioritization of the activities that you're focused on and ensuring that anything that you are working on is obviously incredibly important to the revenue of the company itself, and that it is the top project that's for the business, and then to work smarter, not harder, and then looking at kind of those outdated processes of how much time you're spending in spreadsheets and how much time you're spending in email and how much time you're answering those Slack messages, and then really kind of spearheading on, is there a piece of technology that can solve for this? Because now is really the time where more than ever I need to find that efficiency and figure that out. Anything from submitting a request to actually collaborating with your teammates to just a generalization of processes should be looked at and really kind of reviewed as far as outdated and is there anything that we can improve. And then lastly, and this one has nothing to do with technology, but in general, I think people just need to be kind to themselves and others, and we're kind of all going through this together, and to do whatever they can to prevent that burnout, and then back to that prioritization, make sure that you're working on the projects that you truly feel are going to move the needle. Dennis.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's hard to believe we're about to hit the 3-year anniversary of, or Dennis is about to hit his 3-year anniversary of not having stepped into an office. It's pretty amazing, and certainly burnout and just mental health in general is extremely important. I would add that in the context of this webinar, helping to eliminate the daily grind of manual, tedious work is really something that Pipefy and just the types of technology we're talking about today can really help with. It's hard enough when you're working somewhere, you're seeing friends, you're seeing your LinkedIn feed talking about layoffs, et cetera, but you want to at least have quality of life and quality of work, and getting rid of all of that tedious stuff can really help. And fortunately, technology exists now that can really assist with that.
So Dennis, I don't know if you wanted to kind of lead this one.
Yeah, sure. I certainly can. So we all see the feeds, the LinkedIn feeds, the layoffs, et cetera. Interestingly enough, I do think there will remain an IT and developer shortage. This is all being driven right now, in my opinion, and the opinion of many, the layoffs that have been happening, particularly in the last month, by over-hiring, overstaffing, scaling up of the large tech players for anticipated business that simply didn't grow the way that those organizations thought it would. And that's unfortunate, very unfortunate. I think that a lot of the developers and a lot of the IT teams from those organizations are going to be absorbed within other tech organizations. So what I mean by that is, if I'm working for a product organization, a software product organization, that's where I'm going to want to go. Product developers tend to want to be product developers. I think the customers that we're talking to, which are not software or SaaS firms, are going to continue even more to suffer from not being able to hire developers. And this shortage has been ongoing, forever, for as long as my career has been going on, and certainly it will continue. I think also that there's a knock-on effect to some of what's going on now. I think the H-1B and the visa crisis will actually get worse. I think there will be a shortage based on, frankly, on foreign nationals going back to their original countries because they can't stay here, because their jobs have been lost and they've run out of time. So I think this is only going to exacerbate for sure.
And just to add on to that, to your point, like, I think that regardless if it's a boom or bust, right, IT and developer shortages have always been around, regardless if we're doing really well in the economy or if we're not.
Yeah.
I think what's happened now is that over COVID, going back to that growth at all costs, everyone was in a mad hurry to just build, grow, higher. And we've kind of come back down to earth, right? Where it's like, yeah, we've done all this, but like now your balance sheet is completely out of whack and your profitability is like nowhere in sight, right? So now with the economy a little bit taking a change, it's forcing companies to kind of think deeper of like, okay, what resources do I critically need and what don't? And as part of that, the developer shortage, I think that, so I sit on these PMI kind of leadership groups in which we have conversations, and some of these leaders from top 500 keep saying that, like, I'm making the decision whether or not right now it makes sense for me to hire another engineer or developer and the ramp up time that it takes them to get up to speed, or to influence something like citizen development. So I think regardless of the developer shortages, that's always going to be around. People are just looking for better ways and more efficient ways to balance out their balance sheet and to kind of focus on profitability rather than that just growth at all costs.
Sorry, little update or something. Continuing on. Dennis, do you want to take a stab at this?
Yep. IT resource constraints will push budgets to business units. So business units will have budgets to spend. They want value. They want measurable impact. We've seen that IT has a tremendous backlog. IT has business problems to solve. They're accelerated and exacerbated by the current conditions we're living in. This is where citizen development lives. This is where low-code, no-code technology is ideal for business units. This is where a lot of optimizations can happen. So I think that there will be a natural migration downwards, I guess, of business units no longer being able essentially to get their projects prioritized by IT, and they will look elsewhere. Certainly Quandary has benefited from that. And this only lights a fire under the citizen development notion. And I mean, it's really, businesses have these problems to solve. They have to solve them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. I think that IT is looking at the backlog and the constraint of that and realizing that, updating or fixing an HR system or updating or fixing, something for finance right now is something that's not top priority. So the implementation of a citizen development with the right governance and structure is something that they're really trying to figure out, right? If I can buy a solution in, like Pipefy, for instance, and utilize a Quandary and find out the best way to implement that and have some control over just being what's done
Yep.
and like how, and ensuring that like the maintenance of that doesn't get way out of control and then creates more on their backlog. I think they're really looking to do that. So I think there's just a deeper relationship that's being developed between IT and the department level to find solutions that aren't going to cost IT hours and money, right? And I think that's incredibly important. And
Yes.
that's
Fifth bold prediction. Business focus will be on more flexible business processes. Yeah, the businesses want to focus on processes they own that are under their control. This is going to force collaboration within business units as well as across business units. And I mentioned earlier, one of the sort of published success criteria for citizen development is around a very deep understanding of business operations across those parts of an organization. So there's also the need for business processes, if they are optimized and implemented, to be flexible and nimble. They have to be in order to support innovation, to remain competitive, and using technologies that supports it, certainly like Pipefy. Building heavy, brittle processes, having IT built systems wrapped around those processes and then not being able to change is just simply not going to be acceptable anymore.
And I think you said it best. I mean, I think that as part of that, like CFOs have their eyes wide open, right? And are looking at IT to be able to build some of these processes that aren't requiring them heavy resources and man hours to be able to change, right? And I think as part of that, it's again coming back down to that bottom dollar and just creating efficiency where they can, as much as humanly possible to obviously create more revenue where they thought that they couldn't. So yeah, bold prediction indeed, right? I think the more flexible the business processes, the better opportunity for them to scale. And that's kind of the environment that we're in.
Yep.
So with that, so key takeaways and continued education. So on the key takeaways problem in 2023, it will obviously be critical for businesses to operate with an agile and lean mentality in order to adapt to the economic and market uncertainty that lie ahead. They are looking to do more with less, and will definitely be that will definitely be the mantra to adopt as they continue to review the prioritization of the resources and what they will focus on in the upcoming year. Operational efficiency should be top priority, as it will allow you to gain a strategic advantage in a market where customers will be tough to come by. And there will be thousands, if not millions of dollars that can be added to the bottom line just by updating those outdated processes with the right set of tools that make sense to your tech stack. And then lastly, in 2022, citizen development was, for better or for worse, still up and coming, but in 2023, it's truly the future of innovation and maybe even a survival for some of these businesses. Our current reality is that the opportunity and financial cost of hiring another developer is just not feasible, but by implementing a controlled citizen developer infrastructure, that is. And if you have not done so, already educate yourself on the benefits or reach out to Pipefy or Quandary for help in getting some of your questions answered on how to implement that. Quick pitch, selfish and shameless pitch for Pipefy. We are a low-cost, easy to implement, and very flexible process automation platform. We can basically connect with just about any adjacent vertical specific piece of your tech stack and can really solve any operations pain point that you might have, whether it be procurement, HR, customer success, or IT. If you currently are using email, spreadsheets, Slack, or any of these other adjacent tools to kind of connect the dots, Pipefy can solve for that, making you much more efficient and add some money to your bottom line from that efficiency. So please feel free to reach out. We'd love to chat with you, regardless of what it is. Let's talk for sure.
Thanks, Mark. My quick pitch about Quandary. So we are a remote first consulting organization with an office and a mailbox in Denver, Colorado. We team with business users to enable built-to-suit solutions that meet critical business challenges using low-code and no-code technology, business process automation, and a variety of partners, including Pipefy. We're committed to your people, to our people, to support IT. I've mentioned citizen development a lot today. It's something that we are pushing very forward with very heavily in 2023 in order to help you achieve operational efficiency and accelerate innovation and all of that good stuff.
Excellent. So one final poll question for those of you on the line. If you want to get in touch with us, just go ahead and let us know in this quick poll as you're submitting your questions in for our presenters here today. Just go ahead and let us know if you would like to learn a little bit more information, and we'll be in touch. And with that, we'll get started with our questions. We did have one come in through the chat. This one is, you brought up citizen development as the next generation of application development. Who do you see as the ideal candidate to take on citizen development projects? Do you want to start with this one, Dennis?
I can. So the ideal candidate, I mentioned earlier, an effective citizen development model. At least one published list says that the most important requirement is a very deep know-how of business operations. And I think that is something that is really, really important. So organizations where there is that knowledge exists is, I think, a key element. Obviously, enthusiasm and highly motivated individuals within the organization that aren't afraid of technology, that will dive in, and that's really a very subjective assessment. I completely realize that. And an organization where there is the ability and need and just political will to collaborate with other departments within that organization. In terms of the ideal candidates being which companies out there, we're seeing large and small citizen development popping up in. I mentioned that organically, smaller firms are doing this. We don't call it citizen development, but it's exactly what it is. But those characteristics for most success are still very valid. We need to be working with individuals with a very deep knowledge of business operations who want to dive into the technology to make things better. Larger organizations, it gets a little bit more interesting because often executive sponsors need to get involved, and there needs to be some co-sponsorship with IT, and there needs to be some assessment and a pragmatic view of those projects that are undertaken by citizen development. And I mentioned earlier, but the Shell Oil example is a really nice example of what worked and what doesn't work.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Another question that came in, the second prediction seems spot on for us. In your experience, how does citizen development aid burnout, or does it, if teams are responsible for both their regular jobs and creating their own process application workflows? Maybe Dennis, that's a good one for you too.
Yeah, I can take that. So burnout is a complicated thing. I would argue that burnout can be alleviated by taking control of something that's helping to create your burnout in the first place. So while an investment is required in time and upskilling, perhaps, to build something to get rid of all your spreadsheets and various other forms, getting control of that alone can help, much less, the end product actually alleviating your burnout. Where there is certainly a crunch in terms of bandwidth or in terms of being able to actually do that work, that's where Quandary can get involved. We are often pulled in to help with things exactly like this, but ultimately getting rid of those irritating things that are creating burnout and just, is sort of the primary driver.
Yeah, and just to add to that real quick, I think it comes back down to just the prioritization of the projects that you're working on, right? If
Yep.
a certain organization feels that like enabling a citizen development path and getting that operations person to work on the systems and to create efficiency, then that comes at the cost of some other projects. And it's important, as that leadership team is to balance out the workload and ensure that the mental health and burnout of the employees is at the top of mind.
Thank you. Great responses, both of you. And one quick, we got somebody asking about the slides. If everybody on the line didn't hear this, the slides and the recording will be shared after the session. So keep an eye out in your inbox, or check junk spam folders. If you're looking for the presentation materials, if you only caught part of it, we'll be sharing that with everybody afterwards. So that will be coming your way. One more question that came in. Do you see low-code development as a threat to traditional IT or development? Do you want to start with this one, Mark?
Sure. I mean, Dennis, you probably know more about this than I, but I don't think I'd see it as a threat. I think I'd see it as more of a ease of implementation, right? And honestly, like we keep talking about the backlog of IT, and I think IT is looking for some sort of pressure release at some point, and low code, it gives them the ability to do that. And then I also think we're just moving into a different world of technology right now, which I think is actually badly needed, in which there's a deeper relationship between IT and the rest of the teams, right? Like IT's focus is not only on the tooling for the departments, but it's also on, again, supporting a remote workforce and thinking about the technology that they're going to have across the entire business and organization to do that. And I think that like citizen development and low code and this way that we're going is just, it eases the implementation and allows IT to be more productive on larger, more important tasks within the organization. Dennis, I know that you probably have plenty to say as well.
Yeah, it partly depends on how it's positioned, to be honest with you. And I know that when we are engaging with new prospective customers, we want to be very, very mindful that we do not want to be perceived as a threat. Both Quandary as an outside firm, but as well the notion of citizen development. Within citizen development, there's a concept or an anti-pattern in a way that you do not want the perception that a shadow IT organization is being built, because there is if it is the thing that will upset a true IT organization, is the perception that a shadow group is being built. So, for example, I spent many, many years working for a very big data firm that knows more about me than I know myself in terms of the data it collects. And just the sheer notion of data silos being created, or of there being a lack of governance, or somehow that data not being secured appropriately, would send tears through the IT organization. So things like compliance and security need to be absolutely addressed within a citizen development program within that organization, and they're not unique. So there has to be, when establishing citizen development governance, the cooperation with IT, because this has to be positioned as, we're helping your backlog shrink and helping your end users actually become more effective and your organization become more innovative and nimble. And we are not a threat, and we completely respect the governance and control aspects and other aspects of the larger IT group.
Excellent response. Yes, definitely agree. It's all about how it's positioned. Well, that's all the questions that we had come in today. Thank you everyone on the line for joining. And thank you, Mark. Thank you, Dennis. This is very, very informative information. Appreciate everyone's time and hope to see you again on a future webinar series. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you.